meeting, trying to remember where we were, what we had done.
My last notes are 27 and 28. So.
Yeah, we did those two. Now you're both in it, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Let's see what happens when I sit down. Boxes you out. Oh, good. See?
Okay.
That's the miracle of technology. You see that, Colette? You can see all three of us today. I don't know if you can see us or not.
Right?
There is a man there besides you.
No?
It's just us.
Now see, it zoomed in, just, oh, because Debbie leaned into it. So, Barbara, if you lean in, there, it sees you. Once it sees you.
Okay, I see. I gotcha. I thought it was going by voice, and it's not.
Oh, I saw. I gotta see. I gotta adjust the microphone. I'm sorry. I want to say hello to the live stream community. I'm sorry, I forgot to acknowledge you. Thank you for joining us whenever you are listening in. And again, I'll give my regular little speech that says, if you would like to sit, literally or not literally, sit at the table with us and join in the Zoom conversation, you're welcome to. You just have to send me an email at revlouis@aol.com, and I will send you the Zoom invitation so you can be on our screen and part of our circle. Okay. You can hear okay, can you, Colette?
Yes, I can.
All right, good. So we're making progress. And I think we're ready to read. Should I turn the lights on, or we don't need them?
I'm okay with this. You're fine.
Okay, the picture looks all right in there. Okay. So what did we decide? We are at 29. Okay.
The siege of Jerusalem. Want to read, or do you want me to read? You read last night. Right, your turn.
Okay. Woe to Ariel, the city where David encamped. And year to year, let the festivals run their round. Yet I will oppress Ariel, and there shall be moaning and lamentation, and you shall be to me like an Ariel. And like David, I will encamp against you. I will besiege you with towers, and raise siege works against you. Then deep from the earth you shall speak. From low in the dust your words shall come. Your voice shall come from the ground, like the voice of a ghost, and your speech shall whisper out of the dust. But the multitude of your arrogant ones shall be like fine dust, and the multitude of tyrants like flying chaff. And in an instant, suddenly, you will be visited by the Lord of hosts, with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with whirlwind and tempest, and the flame of a devouring fire. And the multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, all that fight against her and her stronghold, and who distress her, shall be like a dream, a vision of the night, just as when a hungry person dreams of eating and wakes up still hungry, or a thirsty person dreams of drinking and wakes up faint, still thirsty. So shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion. Be astounded and stunned. Blind yourselves and be blind. Be drunk, but not from wine. Stagger, but not from strong drink. For the Lord has poured out upon you a spirit of deep sleep. He has closed your eyes, the prophets, and covered your heads, the seers. The vision of all this has become for you like the words of a sealed document. If it is given to those who can read with the command, read this, they say, we cannot, for it is sealed. And if it is given to those who cannot read, saying, read this, they say, we cannot read. The Lord said, because these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their worship of me is a human commandment, learned by rote, so I will again do amazing things with this people, shocking and amazing. The wisdom of their wise shall perish, and the discernment of the discerning shall be hidden. Woe to those who hide a plan too deep for the Lord, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, who sees us? Who knows us? You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay? Shall the thing made say of its maker, he did not make me? Or the thing formed say of the one who formed it, he has no understanding? Shall not Lebanon in a very little while become a fruitful field, and the fruitful field be regarded as a forest? On that day the deaf shall hear the words of a scroll, and and freed from gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind shall see. The meek shall obtain fresh joy in the Lord, and the neediest people shall exult in the Holy One of Israel. For the tyrant shall be no more, and the scoffer shall cease to be. All those alert to do evil shall be cut off. Those who cause a person to lose a lawsuit, who set a trap for the arbiter in the gate, and undermine justice for the one in the right. Therefore, says the Lord, who redeemed Abraham, concerning the house of Jacob, no longer shall Jacob be ashamed, no longer shall his face grow pale, for when he sees his children, the work of my hands in his midst, they will sanctify my name. They will sanctify the Holy One of Jacob, and will stand in awe of the God of Israel. And those who err in spirit will come to understanding, and those who grumble will accept its instruction. I think we did read that last week.
I think we did too.
I got partway through and I realized.
Yeah, some of the phrases I'm remembering. But it's still worth setting out. Here's Isaiah. The Assyrian army is making haste to move on Jerusalem. Ariel is Jerusalem. It's the city of Jerusalem, but it's not only the city. It's this lingering, I don't know, sometimes I hesitate to say things, especially knowing that I'm talking to the live audience online, but Ariel is Zionists. Ariel is the belief that we are the people of God, and we are chosen of God, and therefore we can do whatever we want. And Isaiah is saying, you're foolish people. You do not understand. This is where I would go back to all of my wringing of my hands during the time when we were reading about the rise of the kingdoms and the kings. And they're making all of their triumphant statements about how God is on their side and all the rest of it, and they have forgotten the covenant of Abraham and Sarah. They have forgotten the purpose of being a chosen people is not to conquest, it's not to dominate, it's not to, be arrogant. And the language in those Mosaic chapters and in the chapters of the Kings is, well, the people are worshiping other gods. They just keep talking about that worshiping other gods. Isaiah makes clear the gods that they're worshiping are the gods of arrogance. They're the gods that abuse the poor. It's not a mystical religious criticism of the people. It's not. And yet it sounds like it is when you read it in 1st and 2nd Kings and in 1st and 2nd Samuel. It's like, the people have done wrong. Well, how have the people done wrong? Well, they're praying to other gods. This is where that gets decoded. Because Isaiah is saying, what does it mean for the people of God to be praying to other gods? What it really means is they don't trust God's justice. They don't trust charity. They don't trust humility. They don't trust giving as a way of living and honoring God. So they aren't, Isaiah's not saying, oh, you're bowing down to other gods. He's saying, you're greedy, you're arrogant, You are ignoring everything that is supposed to characterize the city of Jerusalem. City of Jerusalem, to me, in the vision that's presented, should be the greatest city of refuge in the globe. It should be the place where people can go, and there's food, and there's, the language of that one psalm that says, come, eat, even though you have no money. There's food, there's a banquet, there's the bounty of life and of the earth is set before you. These people, I don't know, Isaiah looks and sees the Assyrian armies bearing down on them, and whether you have that kind of, you do this, God will punish you kind of behavior or not. Isaiah is saying, the Assyrians hate you because you're hateful people. You are. Your city of Jerusalem is hated because, and I'm putting words in the mouth of the prophet here, but the reputation of the kings has made them a pariah in the world community. And there's a lot of people that agree they should just simply be wiped out.
Okay, I'm perplexed a bit by verse 10. For the Lord has poured out upon you a spirit of deep sleep. He has closed your eyes and covered your heads. So the prophets are not prophesying, and the seers are not seeing, and the people are not getting the message, but it sounds like God has done that. Why would God do that?
Yeah. I don't know. This pops up in ancient theology, ancient Hebrew theology from time to time. There's it's like when Moses is commanding to Pharaoh to let the people go, and God hardens his heart. The footnotes say that it doesn't hold up for the whole thing, but the idea is that in Genesis, Adam was put to sleep. Adam was put to sleep when Eve was drawn from his body. And they're saying the word that's used is hearkening back to that. A deep sleep poured upon the people is like that of the first human when the woman was created. And it's also of Abraham when he had revelation of Israel's deliverance from Egypt at the Exodus. I don't know what that means. I think it's just the part in Genesis where Moses is going. But so it says, ultimately, the significance of Isaiah's prophecies will be understood only when later generations read them, perhaps in the time of the Babylonian exile. So it's almost hopeless. They're not going to hear the words.
Right. If God doesn't want you, if God's preventing you from knowing, and if the vision of all of this is like a sealed document, it goes on to say, and there's no way you can decipher it, then what's the point of all the messages? If there's no one at all able to hear, is that the excuse for why they were able to be taken out of the land and subjugated to?
Well, I don't know. I can't get away from the fact that it says, Jeremiah says God is going to stupefy them.
Yeah.
They are, in fact, sealed against hearing Isaiah's words. They're not going to hear it. They're not. He knows it. He says it's because God's made them deaf and dumb. But I don't know if that's anything more than just him trying to say the depth of their denial about what is happening, what's going to happen. Because some of the footnotes say that some of this writing is taking place while the Assyrian army is massing on their border. The army is there. Yeah, and they don't see it, they don't care about it, they have no interest in asking the questions of what's happening and why do these people hate us so much. They don't care. They're going to go on living like they've been living until their children are carried away and their cities are torn down. Now,
And I guess, you know, if you're gonna call yourselves and what you've created as your creation and not God's creation, which it says at the end, then you're in bad shape.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so the insanity, that's insanity, right? For God to superfy them. But I think,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had to struggle with a family member or maybe even yourself when you see the path of destruction. Have you ever had to work with an alcoholic or a person that's addicted to chemical drugs? It is a marvel how blind, how stupefied people become to absolutely not see. They don't see it. They don't see the destruction. They don't see the destruction of themselves or their family or anything else. They only pursue the sweet nectar of the relief that they get from that drug. That's all they see. So all I can say is, I think I get what Isaiah is trying to point to, and that is, he's the prophet, but these people are not going to change their minds. They're not.
They're gone astray, and he can't help them.
Right,
And it looks like God's not stepping in to help them either.
right.
If there's no reciprocal, you know.
Yeah. Because
If you're not recognizing God, then
Yeah.
God's not gonna recognize you.
Right, because the prophets, the people that are other than Isaiah, are speaking what he calls those sweet words. The prophets are telling them, go on, do what you're doing. You'll be fine. You'll just, everything was going to be okay. Don't worry. You are protected by God. This is the thing that Isaiah is trying to say out of both sides of his mouth. One is, you are protected by God, but because you're protected by God does not give you the right to go out and live as if God doesn't exist, to do whatever you want to do, to make the world the way you want it to be. And there's a denial. It's a complete denial, and it's being encouraged by the priests, the theological interpreters. The theology, the predominant theology of the Jerusalem clerics is, do not worry about those Assyrians. Yes, they're amassing on your border. They look like they're going to destroy us, but they're not. Because we're like this with God. We're good with God.
Yeah, and I guess he says earlier too, you're only worshiping by rote. You're not really understanding what that means. You're just repeating what you've been taught.
Right. Your motions for faith or for religious practice are superficial. And you're still trying to draw the benefit of that on you. Meanwhile, your laws are unjust. Your courts are corrupt. No one can find justice in your land. And people, maniacal power barons have taken over the city. And they've also taken over your foreign practices. So you have irritated and annoyed and exacerbated your neighbors, and they're coming after you. Do they hear it? Nope. Do they fall on their faces and say, we're sorry, what do we do to mend this? Nope. It's not happening in their minds.
But yet the last verse, and those who err in spirit will come to understanding.
Right.
And those who grumble will accept instruction. So there is hope, that an acknowledgement that they'll straighten up and fly right.
Yeah, the last little paragraph there from 22 on
Right.
does, like you said, there's hope. Again, we're back to that thing of hope. No longer shall Jacob be ashamed, but there's a whole lot of verses that talk about what is going to happen to arrive at that place where the message finally sinks in.
So you're feeling that this was written as, looking back
Yeah.
on history and explaining it?
Yes. I think it is. I think it's written at a time where Assyria has already done its deed. And as a theologian, Isaiah is trying to offer an understanding, a rationale of it. And he literally is saying the people were so blind, they were so deaf to the word of God. But now he's standing in some place. I don't even know if that last paragraph, and historians don't know either. So was the last paragraph written, was all of this written not only after the Assyrians had had their way, but also after the Babylonians had had their way? Was this optimism part of the hope that characterized the return, and the setting up again? Let's go back and try it again. And that was in the time of Cyrus. So that's 400 years.
Yep.
It sometimes feels like there's a paragraph and they didn't know what to do with it. So
So
they
stick
think,
it there.
well, we need a little longer chapter here, so.
Yeah, and-
Or
you know,
after
it
the
doesn't
doom and
follow
gloom,
with
put in a
anything
good one.
else.
Yeah, yeah, it's like,
And that I think, again, I don't think you really will see what we're seeing. We're seeing what the scholars see. We're seeing what people who read this for a living, not preachers, but people who read the text for a living. We're seeing what they see. And much to the annoyance of people who want it to be, oh no, this is all the words of Isaiah. It's all spoken in a time before, and prophecy means he predicted the future. And it's very annoying, this way that we're doing the reading and discovering these, like, what is this?
Wait a minute.
Yeah, this is sort of sitting here all by itself. And then, so the literary scholars come along and they go, yeah, the word that is the demon of the conservative biblical movement is redacted. The scholars, the literary scholars, believe that Isaiah is parceled and redacted, and that if you listen carefully to its voice, it's a little bit like that simplistic, oversimplistic thing of finding reference to a cell phone, in one part of it, then it didn't come from that time period. And there are equivalents of that. And so,
I would say this, though, could come from any time period,
any time period.
because Ariel, or Israel, is still not that shining city on the hill. It's not open to everybody, as we know.
No, it's not.
It's divided into sections, and you can't go here, and you've got to pass through a checkpoint to get there, and trouble all the time.
Yeah, it's,
So it's not that wonderful citadel where everyone is to come and worship God without, being harassed by the powers that be. It's just not. Will it ever be?
I don't know, Isaiah
says so.
has a vision that the time will come when
Time will
human
come.
beings will finally, in some sort of pure way, overcome our broken human nature and begin to act or live like children of God. Children who receive what we don't earn, who can share the bounty of what we have. And again, you keep hearing this word over and over and over again. I grew up in church, listened to my dad preach 2 times every Sunday, went to Sunday school, never heard the word justice. Not once. Never.
Because Isaiah's full of,
I know. But in the King James, they translated righteous.
oh, you were reading the King James?
Yes. So it's righteousness. And righteousness is not about
Righteousness to
justice
reign.
out in the marketplace.
No.
Righteousness is about being right with God. How many times did they explain that to us? It's about being right with God. And then as Christians, how do you get right with God? Well, you accept the fixing power of Jesus in your relationship to God. So Jesus makes it all okay. And so,
No matter what you do.
yeah, and so the historicity, yeah, and this life reality of books like Isaiah is gone because it's all spiritualized.
Yeah.
It's removed from the context of how we live our lives to, how do we behave when we get to church?
I can be critical of Isaiah, though, too, at this point, because I think Isaiah is only speaking to the Hebrews.
Yes.
It's not making it a universal message, which I would like to think that God means for it to be a universal message. But Isaiah still has it narrowed down to just the Hebrew people.
Yeah, he's wrestling with that exclusivity, and he's encouraging it. I think he believes that if the people who are the Hebrews can get their story straight, that they will, by being reinforced as that special people, they'll get on with their special mission.
And then be able
Yeah, and
to.
the world will benefit from it
You
all.
gotta start from
Yeah,
that
got to
point.
get back to the basic, get the identity of who are we and what is it we're called to do, and, that whole thing of what was God's plan for actually administering blessings into a broken world.
Yeah.
It was to choose people who will carry the blessing, who will live it out. Unfortunately, in ancient Israel's story, having the blessing, carrying it first as a burden, and then living it out turns into that switch that makes them think that they are God's favorite people. That they're the only ones that God cares about. And those are the lies that Isaiah is trying to come up against, because once you start to think that and you go, hey, we have God as our God, and it doesn't matter how we treat anybody else.
Yeah, the message then becomes tainted. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not what you want to spread
No.
through the rest of the world. Of course, people are going to be, angry with that message. I mean, that means that there's forever an underclass, and then there's this one, no. Yeah, I don't think that's what you want.
Yeah, I think it's lived out in the life of Colette and her squirrel, because,
Sweetie is
I mean,
the
Sweetie-
chosen.
Sweetie's supposed to be taking a message back that this woman in this house is friendly to squirrels. But what is Sweetie telling them? She must be telling those children, stay away from that house. Let me be the only one that goes up there. I'm the only one. And then, of course, Colette turns right around and says, I don't want any other squirrels except you.
Oh, you reinforce that.
So,
You're the bad guy
dear.
today.
I'm a bad God.
you're a bad god in the squirrel world. And Sweetie is a bad disciple.
Really? Yeah, but you know what? That
I
kind
will try and change my ways.
of, Aw,
Well, good luck changing Sweetie's ways.
yeah, it
'Cause-
seems to work for you.
Yeah, according to the Bible, you're stuck in that. So,
Oh, that
But-
is really cute and clever.
yeah, and the thing is, I've said this book, many, many, many pages, many, many stories, many, many histories, it reveals a lot through, if you understand the word favoritism. Favoritism is the bane of human existence. The belief that you are favored, or the belief that others are favored. I mean, start back at the story, like Cain and Abel. The Cain and Abel story. There's a rudimentary story of the human experience. Murder arises in the human family because of perceived favoritism. Jacob in the coat of many colors and his brothers, everywhere you turn, there's favoritism at the heart of it. And I think this is where I veer off from traditional theology. I think God had to learn it. I just do. I think God had to learn the devastating effects of having a favorite child. That wasn't the initial idea when Sarah and Abraham were called. They were not called as favored children. The words described are, you were not called as children of Abraham because you were special in the world. You were not. But God had a deed, a work that God wanted to be done for all the families of the world. And God was going to do that through your willingness to say yes.
Sure, and God picks human beings who are imperfect and are filled with jealousy and, and so
Yeah.
how's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so carry that on, because, of course, what was God supposed to do? Every single person failed the test. Noah failed the test. Nobody comes out clean. And yet then when you get to the theologians that followed in the 2nd and 3rd century, they go, well, no, there was one. There was one human being who ultimately did not fail the test, and it was Jesus.
Yes, Jesus.
And he was faithful to the end. He always administered God's grace. He even called injustice into question. Then Paul comes along with his theology and says, so Christ died for all of us.
Yeah.
So Christ's punishment on the cross is the sacrifice that amends all of it. And that, I get lost a little bit in
Yeah.
some of that.
How about Lot, though? Lot didn't, it's never said that Lot was failing.
Now, he was a good guy.
Yeah. So I think there probably were lots of other good people. Even here in this story, everybody in this city couldn't be creepy. I mean, there had to be good people.
I mean, look at our own nation. People talk about, oh, that's America. Well, what is America? Who is America? Who represents us? Because, we have people in other nations who think about us in a certain way, and they think about us because of political, military policies that have been enforced on them that not only did we never have a hand in, but we never voted for them, and we didn't know about them. And yet, that's the world of nations. It's the world of politics.
It's an imperfect world. Is it ever going to be perfected? I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a quick thought to answering that. I think it is an imperfect world. Will it ever be perfected? I think there are perfect acts in an imperfect world. There are perfect acts. There are acts of love. And those acts of love, those things of love and compassion and care and justice, you cannot put a mark against them. You cannot put a blemish on those
Maybe
acts.
that's what makes this imperfect world bearable. The only thing.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's, in the end, it's what Isaiah is pleading for the people to come back to be.
Yeah.
Don't you understand? He's sort of, up on his soapbox. Don't you understand that when you trade, when you bargain for power because you're insecure, you are undermining all of the delicate balance of God's world. And conversely, especially here in the last paragraph, it's beautiful. So God who redeemed Abraham, I don't know what that means exactly. Therefore, it says the Lord who redeemed Abraham. I don't know if that means he was called out from among the broken human beings. Concerning the house of Jacob, no longer shall Jacob, that's Israel, no longer shall Israel be ashamed. No longer shall his face grow pale. For when he sees his children, the work of my hands, I don't know what that means either, in his midst, they will sanctify my name. They will sanctify the Holy One of Jacob and will stand in awe of the God of Israel. And those who err in spirit will come to understanding, and those who grumble will accept instruction. Really? You think that's ever going to happen in the world? Those who grumble are just going to accept instruction? But Isaiah believes it can happen.
I guess anything can happen if you wait maybe long enough.
My
And-
note says,
yeah.
Abraham redeemed by God's call
Okay, yeah.
to journey into the promised land, becomes the model for those who return to Judah in the post-disaster period.
Yeah, so Abram and Sarah are redeemed, means they're drawn out. That's another word for chosen. They're drawn out from among the masses of human beings for this mission and this purpose. And I understand the footnote is saying, in some ways they see history repeating itself as now in the aftermath of all the disaster that's happened. God is again redeeming Israel, redeeming Jacob, calling them back.
Right. So they have this chance to try again,
Yes. Try it over again.
do over.
Yeah, and let's see how that goes. I mean,
I think we, on the other side of history now, can see it's kind of a rocky road. There's no guarantee.
I mean,
Do over and it's done over the same old way.
Yeah.
When will we ever learn?
well, I think what destroys us, what decays our sense of our call to life is when life gets good.
Yeah, yeah. In Islam, the shaitan puts good things, the things we perceive as wonderful, in the way to him and not in the way to God. So you're distracted by wealth, by your children, by, all the wonderful things we do that make us feel like we're powerful, we have it all, we
It's a
can
good
never
life,
fail.
right? It's the good life.
And I think Isaiah here is saying, get over yourselves, because that's not, you're letting yourself be distracted. And, that's the shaitan putting pitfalls in your way to blind you to what's really important. God's way is not, that doesn't mean we can't have good stuff, but we got to remember who is providing that, not us. And Isaiah says that in this passage as well. When the made think they are the makers, then there's something wrong
And
there.
isn't that almost, I mean, Jesus himself weighs in on this discussion when he says it's very difficult for a woman or man who's very wealthy and has everything going to enter into the realm of heaven, of the kingdom of God, not life after death,
Right,
but
right.
to actually have the sense of God's reign in their life. It is extremely difficult.
It is.
So we almost ought to pray for hardship, right?
Well,
We ought to pray for difficulty because difficulty keeps us close to God. And what destroyed Israel? What destroyed it? In ancient Israel was destroyed by its success and its wealth, and it gave rise to its arrogance. It gave rise to its sense of conversion of the meaning of the mission and the call, all perverted, and maybe the blindness that they are experiencing is like the blindness that the shaitan brings in prosperity, in wealth, in,
right.
and
Feed our children. Jesus says that too. My children, my family is not the thing that's going to bring me to God. It's the thing that's going to make it impossible. It's the thing that will take you away. I have come not to comfort. What are the exact words he says?
yeah, I did not come to bring peace. I came to
Right.
bring a sword to separate parents against children and
Right.
brothers against sisters.
And that is so not what you think that Jesus
No.
would be saying, but I think he's trying to get at this idea that those things can bring you off the path you want to be on.
Yes. So again, I don't know what we should pray for.
Yeah.
Look, I watch with amazement, I watch the stories of these.
Just take those boxes, yeah.
She's talking to
Yeah.
Sweetie.
Probably.
Good luck, Lois. Good
Oh,
luck.
somebody. And
Yeah,
they-
somebody's at the door. I watch with amazement
Good
about
luck with the
how,
operation.
whether it's
Yeah.
people in
Good luck.
theater become famous or even in
Okay.
politics,
I'll be thinking
Fame.
about you.
wealth
Thank you.
decays the inside of a human being. And yet,
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll say it
I
for
know, but I'm humble enough to still think, oh,
I'm in
why wouldn't
Bible
happen to
study.
me?
Right.
You know,
Right.
if I could just have a couple $100 million,
I
you
would
know.
use it.
oh,
wisely.
I would use, oh my goodness, I would see to it that, people benefited from my benefit.
I
but
would never
it
take round the
doesn't-
world trips on my friend's fancy yacht,
And it just doesn't,
it's the temptation of
it
that.
doesn't
Therefore,
happen.
I was just watching An Evening with Harry Belafonte that was filmed in 2000 with Danny Glover, and I didn't realize that I knew Harry Belafonte was very close to Martin Luther King, but what he had said to Martin Luther King, who was concerned about his family and that he couldn't take gifts from people because what would it look like and would that compromise him? But yet he was making $1,000 a year as a preacher, and Harry Belafonte said to him, I will take care of your family. I will make sure your kids are educated. You know, I will economically assist your family. You don't have to worry about that, which I never,
I never knew that.
He was a very giving, caring person. And also he was talking about when he had gotten, I guess, was it a Tony? It was some award, I think it was the Tony, and he was supposed to be on Ed Sullivan, and you had to sign something, and he was blacklisted at the time, and they gave him a list of organizations that were questionable that he belonged to, and they asked him to sign it. I said, not only will I sign it, I'll give you some more organizations you can add to.
You can add to the list.
And then later that day, they called him and said, you can come on the show without
He was
signing the thing.
Popular enough that didn't,
I guess so.
didn't stand
but,
in the way.
Well, so there's an example that,
That makes me love him even more.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. No, he was
Yeah.
communicating with Nelson Mandela while he was in prison, and he was connected to a priest. He mentioned the name of someone in South Africa who came to speak to him. So he was always involved in caring for everyone and not saying, okay, it's all mine now, so. There are exceptions.
oh, there are, and maybe there's just the same number of examples, like to either side of the scales. Maybe if we knew it all, that we would say, you know, half the people who rise to power and fame figure it out. They figure out how not to lose their soul. But then you see, you know, I still, the two people that, or maybe three, I mean, Elvis Presley is an example of one who could not handle it, could not live with it. Michael Jackson, same thing. And the story of Prince. I mean, there's a guy, you listen to his music, it's full of compassion and care and calling for justice, but the guy could not live with the wealth and fame that accumulated to him, and it destroyed him.
And he was generous, though, with his work, because he gave a lot of things, music that he wrote to other people,
Right.
other artists, and he didn't seem arrogant.
No, he just
He
couldn't.
just got hooked on
Yeah.
something that he felt maybe was lacking in his life, and then he had pain.
Right,
Maybe we should, you know,
but
look
it's,
into the
you know,
folks who make the painkillers. I think we have, haven't we?
well, and that
the
was,
family,
that was also the story with Elvis too, that his
Yeah.
promoters drugged him and wanted him to be able to
perform.
continue performing when he was sick. And they got him addicted because maybe it wasn't Elvis that became greedy, but maybe it was the promoters and the handlers and the people behind him. You know, this,
Probably a long list of folks you can blame. So, you know, people that have those very human foibles about addiction and things, I don't completely blame them in the end. But, you know, they were unlucky to have that trait in
Right.
their character, which
yeah, and then they had endless access because of their wealth.
Money
And they had their own private doctors, and they could get whatever they wanted. So,
and people who are not helping them, they're hindering them by
Right.
pushing them to perform even when they're in great pain or, you know, whatever.
so what do you wish for? What are you supposed to wish for in this life?
I don't know.
You know, enough pain to keep you humble, right? Enough hardship to keep you tied to the earth, keep you away from the seductions.
I don't think I know enough to wish for anything.
I'm
Allah,
not about
Allah.
to start praying for more pain,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
God knows best, I'm not gonna, just when you think you know best, that's when you don't know best at all. So, that's a pitfall too.
No, and how many pathways lead to destruction in life?
Many
A
of them.
lot of them.
Yeah.
Even some of them that look like, you know,
Goods.
they're good, gonna be good for you, gonna be good for the world. And
I can't figure out my own life, let alone tell somebody else, you know, what they should be doing. And yet that's part of the human condition. We all like to, like Jesus said, watch out for the beam in your own
oh,
eye.
yeah, yeah.
While you're telling everybody else.
So much easier to see what you're doing wrong.
Right.
I'm perfect, right?
Uh-oh.
I was having a conversation, I don't know, I get involved with people from all walks of life in what I do, and so I was having a conversation with a woman who's going through some difficult times. She knew I was a pastor, and she was talking to me. We were just walking, like, on the street, and I knew she was a member of a church. And I said something to her like, you know, is your church helping you out? And she said, well, Pastor, you don't know my church. I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, I was in church last Sunday, and I'm having these difficulties, and this woman walks up to me and says, I've had a prophecy about your life.
Uh-oh.
And this is a church that's open to that kind of talk.
Okay, Isaiah, what are you
Yeah,
saying?
so this woman has a word of prophecy for her.
Uh-oh.
And of course, I am immediately shut off. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna walk on down the road, because why would you even associate with people who do that? I mean, there are people in my life who try to tell me what to do, but they don't put it in the guise of,
God,
I had a
is that
dream
right?
from God last night,
Right.
and this, and of course, the message, and so she said, so I said, okay, what is it? And the prophecy was, you are not gonna thrive in New Jersey. You need to pack your family up and move to Florida.
Oh,
Yeah,
Was this person a realtor in Florida?
maybe.
Is it just
No,
anxious
come
and
on,
wants
she
another
heard from God. She heard from God. And see, I get it, because the congregation that my father was a pastor of was like that. God would speak to people, and they would stand up and talk to the church based on what God had said to them in a dream or in a whatever, an ecstatic utterance or whatever. Or they would see you individually, and they would say, you know, I've been watching you in church, and God gave me a word. That was the phrase. God gave me a word to say to you. And I want to go, okay, if that's where I have to go to be a follower of God, I want out.
Leave me behind.
I want out, because I cannot leave my critical thinking behind. I don't want to. I do not want to. So what did I say to this woman? She's there, and I said, well, that's what you get for going to that church. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's how I feel. I'm like, that, you know, you're going to go there, you're going to get that.
Yeah.
You want a word from God? Okay. You come to the High Mountain Presbyterian Church, you might worship here for 3 years and never have a word from God. You might never have a word from God. But if you listen carefully,
You might.
maybe you'll hear it in an anthem, or maybe you'll, you know, but it'll be up to you to determine.
Someone else will.
Yeah, nobody's going to walk up to you and hand you a baked cake that says, here's, you know, here's,
Inside is a file.
Here's the
yeah,
message.
right. Here's what God wants you to do in your life. I mean,
Oh.
I just can't, I don't know. I sometimes don't know where I fit in the whole religious spectrum.
It's a very large spectrum. Thank
Oh,
God.
my goodness, it is. And then I also work on trying not to be arrogant, you know, not to say you're a foolish person. I don't really believe that. What I really believe is, I hope that works out for you okay. Like, if you can thrive in that environment, then that's good for you. But
But if you feel uncomfortable,
yeah, you might want to get away from that.
want to think about it.
You might want to just, maybe you haven't been exposed to the fact that there are other communities where faith is real, where it's real, where people are trying to live their life in faith, but that is not part of it. You don't have little Isaiahs walking around, standing up and saying, this is what God wants you to do. I don't know.
That's what we want, though. You know, as human beings, we want a blueprint. We want it, you do this, and then the result will be this. And as you get older, you realize that that does not work, and it doesn't depend upon your faith.
No, that's right.
Stuff just happens. Your faith helps you cope with what happens, but it doesn't, if you pray harder, that means that nothing's gonna happen to you that's bad. It's just not, and that book is full of that. If there's nothing else that you learn from that, it's like, stuff happens, deal with it. Get over yourself and deal with it.
Yeah, and allow your faith in God to keep you calm, focused, so that in the middle of whatever trial comes or whatever difficulty, you don't lose sight of the fact that you can still make a difference in the lives of other people.
Yeah.
That you don't allow your fear to suppress the signs of your faith. That you can still somehow, beyond understanding, you can now be a generous person. Or maybe you risk some standing in the community when you take a side that is unpopular on behalf of somebody you don't even know. But you stand up. You say. I mean, it's one thing to call out to God and say, hey, God, stand up and,
Do something about it.
do something. And then, you hear that story like God goes back, you're the something I'm supposed to be doing.
Right. I sent you, and,
That's right.
and that's Jesus's life. I mean, he's forever mingling with the tax collectors and the prostitutes and the poor and the people that are not esteemed, and why would you want to associate with the Samaritans, or, but that is what he was meant to do.
Yeah.
And, how many of us can continually do that? It's really hard, because, you want friends, you want to be something in the community, and then as soon as that's challenged, I cave. I mean, I'm like, I know what I should do, but I'm not speaking out. Or I know who I should be friendly with, but I'm kind of dissing them because it's not what the leader likes,
Yeah, taking a stand. It's not,
human, but
yeah.
not good.
And it's, in my work in church over the years, like, the hardest thing for me is when people finally get that sense and they go, okay, I'm not going to think just of myself. I'm really going to try to put myself out there. I'm going to try to seek the benefit of someone else. And in their first foray out, they run into somebody who takes advantage of them.
And that's it.
And
Not going to be a schmuck
I'm
anymore.
not doing that anymore. I remember this one man who, we housed the homeless in the Boundbrook Church, and it was that program of rotating where once a week people came and they slept in the church, and it was a pretty big group of people. So we recruited the volunteers, we had the charts all set up, and this one guy was like, all right, I can give up a night's sleep. So he came out. He was not prepared for what he ran into because, people were living on the street, struggling for every circumstance. I mean, he was there, but his perception was that the people who were there, he was trying to watch the kids while, one of the moms could take a rest or something. And she didn't ask in quite the right way. And after he did it, she didn't thank him, and he thought her attitude stunk. He's like, those people and their attitude, they are not grateful, and this can't be what God's calling us. I'm like, oh my goodness.
That, you would not be surprised, I guess, to know that fully about half the volunteers I used to get to do that, no matter whether you prepared them, please don't do this, please don't proselytize, please don't give advice that's not asked for. And I would say about half people, they start out that way. And if they volunteer again, they kind of get over it after a while, but initially, it's like,
And a lot of very well-meaning
they do
people,
mean
Oh,
because
right.
They think, I
I
have
have
the
the
answer
Right.
to that person.
If only you would
Right,
just you know, and they don't understand fully who you can't, it's just an acquaintance at that point. You don't have that relationship with that person.
Yeah.
It's just the arrogance of feeling, you know, I made it, and I got the answer, and I'll help you, I'll just tell you what to
Yeah,
do,
I'll-
and you
right.
better thank me. And it's like, you know, it's just, I would keep trying to remind people, these are people who've worked all day, they're
Yeah.
coming in here at night, very tired,
Colette has to leave.
aw,
Bye, Colette.
bye-bye, Colette.
Speaking of, do you have clergy today? It is every other week.
Oh.
I have to keep your
I
schedule.
think they changed it for one reason or another, because he was gonna email us, and I did not get an email. So I'm gonna go with the fact that it's not today.
Okay.
Yeah, he did not email today. I don't know, I forget what the deal was, but,
Okay. Just
I'm gonna
didn't
go
want
find
you to
out.
be
Yeah, thank you.
on the bad list.
no, thank you. I don't wanna be on the bad list either. I don't.
So, you know, it's difficult though when you have a lot. It's difficult to remember that you may not have been the reason that you have a lot.
Right.
Where is the gratitude? While the people are saying, oh, they didn't say thank you to me, did you say thank you for what you have? I mean,
We used to sequence 15 years of taking teenagers into very poor communities, and teenagers who are very wealthy in the world standards, and I would call it wrestling them to the ground. Because people look at our schedule and they say, wait, you're arriving on Saturday, but you're not actually going out to work until Monday. I'm like, yeah, because we're spending 2 days wrestling these arrogant human beings. Not trying to criticize them, but to get them to understand what these people have opened their lives to have us do. So we would try to explain that when we arrive at the house, we'd actually do training exercises to talk about how you're going to talk. You're not going to say, oh, look at that junky thing. And
Right.
they really didn't get this. And if you're walking across the lawn and there's garbage all over the lawn, you're not going to pick it up. You're not. And they're like, what? Well, we're here to do good. No, you're not going to do anything that you are not asked to do by the homeowner. Because if you do, they get it. They get it in a second. You're like, oh, God, these people can't even pick the garbage up out of their yard. And so what we would say is, after you've spent 5 days living with them, working with them, and all the rest of that, you might begin to understand what it's like and why there's garbage in the yard in a way you can't imagine. And we would make some inroads, and then, of course, the ones that were impossible were not the kids. They were the adults.
So, yeah, right.
You know, we would
That
say,
happens.
you're going to go into a house, you're going to go into houses that the floor is rotted through in the living room, and you have to walk around the edge, and the couch is falling through. The toilet in the bathroom is falling through there. And when you get to the bedroom, you're going to see a horrible condition, but you're going to see a large screen TV. And when you see it, you are going to shut your mouth. You are not going to turn to your friend who was with you and say, oh, see,
that.
they don't really need help.
They
Like,
got it, the TV, look at that.
but it was productive, but we did, I can think right away of one man who, he came with his daughter on the trip, and he was just convinced that we were out of our minds, that this should be more of a scorched earth kind of help, come in, tear down their houses,
Oh,
oh yeah, he was like, this is ridiculous. And by the way, if anybody buys a large screen TV when they don't have money for milk, then they're off the program.
it's their own fault. Well, I remember when cell phones first started to be popular, and a lot of people would come to the homeless shelter and say, all these people have cell phones, how in the world, are we supposed to feel sorry for them? Look, they're walking around with a cell phone, wouldn't it be better spent on whatever, And I'm like, you're not kind of understanding that in order to get a job, you have to have some form of communication.
Right.
And when you don't have an address, how is an employer supposed to get in touch? You know, after a while, people started to kind of understand, but it's like, don't criticize until you actually kind of understand that, what's going on, you know?
And I think
it's
that's
hard.
why you look at the words that Isaiah uses. These are not vague religious words. He talks about arrogance. His spear that he is chucking at the chosen people is the spear of arrogance. You have no basis for being arrogant. None. You're not smart. Like, you know, you're not smarter than the people around you. You're not better than them. You are in the unique position of being supposedly in relationship with God. Well, who is God? God is humble. God is full of grace and mercy. So, are you people of God or not? And he walks away saying, you're not. You can't be. But maybe there's hope that it'll eventually sink in for you, you know, that people do change and they have conversions. I mean, thank God for that. The people get converted. They live in a certain direction and then they come back and they, you know, they live their life with a new perspective.
That's the hope, I think, with volunteerism, is that it's not so much, you're certainly helping the person that you're supposed to help, but what is it doing to you? And what does your life, how does it change your life? And, you know, I think that, first of all, I think that just exposure to the other, that us and them kind of thing is so important. And people, you know, live in this little box.
Yeah, I think,
little boxes.
yep, I think more so now than ever.
Yes.
Now we can be, I mean, I think we found it in COVID, in the isolation. We discovered isolation caves in our lives. We know that we really can do more than just not talk to our neighbors.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we can do much more than that. We can be much more withdrawn and much more isolated.
Right? Not even
Without-
talk to
yeah.
our workmates or even our family most of the time. You know, when I started working with IRF, when I came in, there were things that you were told that when people start criticizing the guests, that you're supposed to say things like, you know, they are human beings just like you and I. They are just like us, just like us. Well, after a while, I realized I'm not saying that because they're not.
Right.
You have a home. You have
Right.
advantages that they don't have. So yes, are we all human? Do we have a lot in common? Yes. But I'm not going to say to some volunteer, you know, they're just like us, because it's obvious they're not.
Yeah.
Their lives are very different.
Yeah, and so to understand that there are differences between human beings, and, you know, we come in all shapes, sizes, conditions, and try and understand one another and do the best you can. But, you know, simple solutions are never, they never work.
No. And I think the advantage of engaging in the works of mission is that if you really give yourself to it in a wholehearted way, you discover that it's not just talk, but that authority and power and money tend to erode something in you. But that real works of compassion, real works of giving, it adds something to you. It's counterintuitive. It is totally counterintuitive. And I think that for whatever parts of this that are troubling, I think that's the word that is trying to emerge out of this. Don't be deceived by how the world looks. Don't be deceived by how you think it works. Instead, in the pursuit of a relationship with God, walking in these pathways, which is what Isaiah is screaming about. Say, how did you become this people? And of course, I've said this before. I think they became this people because they didn't listen. They got a king, They got a dynasty, they built a city of imperial power, and they raided and raped the world. They just did. Like, and what, we're supposed to celebrate that history? I don't know. I don't think so. I think the northern tribe tried harder to resist that. People that they called Samaritans, somehow being of mixed blood, helped them to be more humble and to stay more on the task. As they said, we don't have to go to Jerusalem to worship God, we can go up in the mountains. But,
No, but that ruins the economy.
yes, it does.
If you don't come and spend your money here, it's somehow almost always for us, those pitfalls are those things that are attractive. Money, power, those things. So good luck, Isaiah. You s- Your last commentary still hasn't come to fruition,
No.
unfortunately.
Well, we could wade into chapter 30, it's a big one, but there's a lot I want to talk about in that, because this is where, to me, Isaiah reveals his political philosophy, which I completely disagree with. So how arrogant can I be, right?
Well,
Because he really reveals that any attempt for Israel to ask for help from neighbors or other nations is a step away from faith.
well,
God has promised to protect us. What are we doing? Make deals, and I was talking to my friend Ben, and I told him a little bit of that when we touched on it in another thing. He's like, he just looked at me and went, well, I completely disagree. I went, yeah, I do too. So what are we supposed to do when you come across this, here's the Holy Writ? Again, I'm still having an argument with my childhood religion. You really want to go into the world today and say, part of a nation that wants to be a nation of God is a nation that refuses to sign any treaties, especially no treaties with anybody who behaves in any way that is contrary to our way of life. Now, sometimes I wish that we wouldn't be in alliance with some nations which we do commerce with, but we do not raise human rights issues. That we compromise our stand in the world because we want to do well economically.
Well, it's always all or nothing. Just like if the countries were in any way communist or leaning towards communism, then we wouldn't have anything to do with them. But if they were dictators and doing horrible things to their
but they're
people,
giving us an advantage somehow.
right?
Well, because they're dictators, they can.
Right.
They can just
do
simply
whatever
say, yeah, we'll give you these advantages. And by the way, the world doesn't even have to really know. But yeah, we tend to side. I mean,
It's an either or rather than and, both. You need to find that middle way. So many times we say, do we not say your human rights stances are not good and we don't like it? And is there anything that you can do about it? But doesn't mean that we're going to, because it's not the people.
no, that's right. It's not the people.
It's the people that are getting screwed.
Yeah.
And by
Not
the
the
way, who
dictator.
are we? I mean, we like to go in and say, you should do this,
Right,
and you
right.
should treat your people that way. And in the meantime, we have people shooting each other on our doorsteps because we can't stand up to the NRA. What gives us, what's the middle ground? How do we walk knowing that we are flawed and admitting that, and yet still able to tell other people, maybe we don't want to do business with you if you are, oppressing half your population,
It's always my way or the highway.
Yeah.
But we're the moral majority. Come on, among the nations, we're the most moral nation in the world.
We like to, we
We've done so
we
many
give
things
our
to be
kids
proud
that
of
propaganda
that
in
that
school.
they're now trying to take out of the history books.
Right, exactly. Like, don't read that though, because we are the good guys. Well, we're not always the good guys. I mean, the movies that you saw, I love old westerns. I don't know why. Maybe because you don't have to think. because there's good guys, there's bad
That's right,
guys.
and the good, you can tell the good guys, they wore white.
Yeah, sometimes, or they were handsome and the bad guys were
Yeah,
ugly.
yeah, that's right. Bad guys always had scars on their faces and,
It looked
you know,
like this.
that's right, they
The
always,
good guy always looked like they came out of the
their horses always
makeup
looked
studio.
shot. Like,
But then those westerns that came along and had flawed good guys
Yeah.
and good bad guys, you know, they were like, okay, that's more like life. I can learn something from this, but it's not as juvenile. You don't go to the Saturday matinee to see those. Those are the ones the adults watch.
right,
Can we not be adults when we approach the rest of the world? We don't have to say we are always only good. I mean, that's just not realistic. That's a really silly way of looking at the world. That's a kid-like way, you know.
well, and at that time, I think there was a kid-likeness to the experience of an America, you know, that in a kid-like way, everybody thought was, you know, above reproach and everything was fine, and we were the guys in white, guys in particular, you know.
The white
Yeah,
guys in
that's right,
particular.
the white guys in particular, and life was easy. Life was easy, you killed the bad guys.
Life was easy if you were a white guy.
Yes,
right,
it is,
exactly.
Not so
it
much.
is, it still is.
I think I just saw that big conference the NRA had a week or two back, and there's a clip of, is it the governor of, is it Colorado, Nome? What's her name? I can't think of it. Anyway, she's like bragging that she has 2 kids, and one of them is 2.5, and the other one is like an infant. She says, and the 2.5-year-old already has a shotgun and a handgun. And, and she's saying, see, so, you know, not all of us who venerate the NRA are white men. And then they show a panoramic view of the audience, and indeed, okay, there's a couple of white
Right.
women thrown in there,
Right.
but it's
It's
all
all
white men. And it's like, come on, lady. And why would you give your kid, your 2-year-old daughter,
Kids weren't
a
allowed
shotgun?
water guns.
Right.
Pistols, not mine.
What's wrong with this picture? That is not America, and that's what bothers me, is they have all those flags, and they say, this is what America stands for. Idiocy? I mean,
Well, they push the symbol into the corner they're living in. So they drag the flag, and I mean, it's not just one flag, it's 500 flags. You can't see anything that isn't red, white, and blue. And it's like, you know, you're trying to brand your life and your way as America.
right,
Meanwhile,
let's
There-
not speak into the whole of
there
us.
are-
That's not-
that's the idea of America, wasn't it?
that-
A million different ways of living.
E pluribus unum.
Yeah, like,
Not just your way. And I don't feel bad about criticizing stuff like that at all.
no, I don't either. All right, well, I'm going to say goodbye to our online community. I'll go turn off the microphone so we don't have to worry about what we talk about now.
We might get thrown
You
off
know.
the air again.
I know.
My sister was just banned from Facebook.
Ooh, who did she anger?
I don't know, it's really ironic because
She was